Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel. Thank you so very much for joining me this evening. Wherever you are in the world, whatever time zone you're in, and whether it's morning or night, I do hope that you're keeping lovely and warm and getting that lovely hot cup of cocoa, or if you're going on a walk with me, that's fantastic. So before we settle down, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, my name is Matthew, but people tend to call me Matt for short. I'm from Grand Junction, which is the largest city in western Colorado that is situated along the Colorado River on the western slope of the Rockies and has become a very popular mountain biking destination, which is well revered for its magnificent panoramic views over large statuesque rocks, some that could be individualistically works of art in their own right, along with, of course, the quintessential Colorado mountains, ridges, canyons, prairies, and mountainous outcrops. I live in the largest neighbourhood here that is known as Spring Valley, in the northernmost part of Grand Junction, that consists of vast open spaces of magnificent green turf, rolling hills, basketball courts, picnic tables and grills, but also is conveniently centrally located with shops, movie theatres and restaurant amenities close by. I grew up in this very open, spacious part of the world with two sisters, Jenny and Carly, and was raised by both my fun-loving, gentle and easygoing parents. We really had a very idyllic outdoorsy type of life growing up, which incorporated lots of socialising, parties, barbecues, hiking, camping and fishing excursions. I grew up in a very standard-looking ranch-style home with a spacious front and backyard, which I won't describe to you or your listeners because dare I say that it was far from exceptional, rather mediocre, bog standard if you like, and run-of-the-mill. You see, both my parents' consummate leanings and accomplished talents were certainly not disposed to the artistic side, so even the decor in our home left much to be desired. It lacked flair, finesse, and of course style. Still, I suppose it served our most immediate needs as a home, but inspirational it most certainly was not. One day my mother invited some relatives of ours for a barbecue at our home, and the day was absolutely amazing with exquisitely beautiful Colorado spring weather, a sumptuous feast of melt-in-the-mouth barbecued chicken, sticky ribs and marinated beef kebabs that were served with mac and cheese and a vast selection of delectable salads, including a firm favourite of mine, feta cheese and watermelon, serenaded by lots of black pepper. I was about 15 at the time and was about to go and play with my friends when I overheard one of the adults talking about an account she'd heard of a killer whale sighting somewhere in Antarctica. I was always fascinated by animals, so I was eager to listen in. It was extraordinary, she told us. The killer whales attacked and killed their fair share of seal pups. They tossed them up in the air like pizza dough in an Italian restaurant, gorging on them in a bloody feast that was hard to watch. When they were no longer hungry, one killer whale, or orc if you like, escorted a live seal pup back to its mother. So you see, not all animals are just vicious killers. They have intelligence and empathy, it would seem. Wow, said my mother, now that is some story. I happen to have a huge appreciation and passion for orcs myself. They're undoubtedly intelligent creatures to show mercy like that. It clearly suggests that they have emotions. Well, they are mammals, said my father reflectively. They should be intelligent. My mother's sister Tabitha looked at my mother and said, "Do you remember the extraordinary account of the Bigfoot that grandfather related to us all those years ago, when the Bigfoot also showed extraordinary mercy to an animal, proving that they are also not just aggressive, treacherous killers?" My mother shook her head. "I don't remember that." "Well, I suppose I was about 15 at the time," reflected my aunt, when he told us the incredible story, which would have made you about 9, I guess. I suppose it's hardly a wonder you don't remember his astounding account, although at the time he had no idea the creature was Bigfoot, because naturally it wasn't documented by science in those days. "Tell us the story," begged my mother. "I want to hear it. We all do." I immediately sat very still as I listened intently to this incredulous, phenomenal story that my aunt unveiled before us, which was like unearthing an amazing secret from a hidden vault that had been cloaked in mystery for a very long time. Suddenly the contents were being revealed to us, and we were the first ears of this generation to hear this remarkable story. It concerned my great-grandfather, and my ears were burning with excitement as I listened to my aunt. I hung on to her every word, and it did not disappoint. In truth, the story quite literally blew my mind like a stick of dynamite because it was so awe-inspiring. I recently contacted my aunt to recount the story to me again so that I didn't miss any detail. I wanted to share it with you and your listeners. I do not know the exact location of this experience, but it did happen somewhere here in Colorado, which gives you an idea of location geographically, I would hope. So this is the extraordinary story that she shared with me. My grandfather was a remarkable man. Sadly, he passed away over 25 years ago. But he was a very skilled, accomplished hunter and tracker, with a proficient, stupendous reputation for helping hunters retrieve their lost hunting trophies. He recalled multiple occasions to me when a hunter would actually not be able to repossess the deer they shot. They would be searching for the deer, sometimes even for days after a shooting. Many would leave empty-handed and unrewarded, wondering what on earth had happened to the deer they'd shot. It had mysteriously just disappeared off the face of the earth. As incongruous as it sounds, this does actually happen. In those days, hunters always pursued the deer they killed, in the same way a lion or a tiger would require technique and cunning skill in order to take down its prey. They would locate and stalk the deer with masterful stealth, discretion and efficiency. My grandfather said that this was one of the best ways to take down a sizable buck, because these animals tend to lie down low in the thicket and areas where they're easily concealed and less conspicuous. The deer are naturally intelligent and are well aware of the perilous dangers of hunters, so they instinctively choose to remain invisible and out of plain sight. There was none of this sitting and hiding out in a deer stand waiting for the animal to come to you. As my grandfather would say, that was the worst way to hunt for a sizable deer. Instead, they'd find out where the deer were congregating and pursue them that way, sometimes even for days. Of course, things were a lot different in those days, as they didn't have easy access to cell phones, which makes all the difference today. My grandfather would invariably receive a call from a hunter once he'd returned home from the hunt, begging him to help them retrieve a lost deer for them that they were unable to detect. "I know I shot him," they would say to my grandfather, whose name was Cliff. "It should be dead," they continued. "It was such a clean shot, but it has seemingly vanished into thin air. Where on earth could it have got to?" they would chide. My grandfather owned 2 female German shepherds that he had raised from very young and trained to pick up a blood trail called Dolly and Missy, and they were brilliant at recovering dead deers that hunters could not find after an intrepid, valiant hunting excursion that required deep concentration, furtive stealth and masterful skill. Losing a deer after shooting, as strange as it sounds, is not uncommon as you may think, believe me. The blood trail of a dead animal is significantly stronger than that of an injured one, so both dogs were very efficient in assisting my grandfather in recovering a dead or injured deer. Their advanced sense of smell was a prerequisite for the job at hand, because it assisted my grandfather to detect the animal much more efficiently. You see, as humans we are limited to only 6 million olfactory receptors, while dogs have 300 million, and their nasal tissue is 30 times larger than ours, so dogs rarely can pick up smells that we cannot even detect, so they are invaluable as an asset for a tracker, and my grandfather would never work without them. He would attach a harness to his dogs as he followed their lead, and would always observe his dog actually evaluating in their mind what was the best route to take to retrieve the deer. Even for a dog, thinking was always involved in the recovery of an absconding deer almost every time. If the injured deer was found lying in the brush, my grandfather would always alleviate its pain and suffering by swiftly taking it out of its misery with a single gunshot. It's not ethical to leave an animal to suffer, which was another reason my grandfather's help was so fundamental for the hunters. Many of them killed to eat to provide food for their families, and not just for sport. and they were exceedingly compassionate about the welfare of wild animals, which of course is a hallmark for being human. He would say that many hunters believed that they'd shot a deer dead but had actually been deceived or tricked by their own eyes, in falsely assuming this to be the case, when in fact the animal had not succumbed to a deadly fate at all, and was happily frolicking away in an open meadow or prairie or woodland area. Believe me, this happens more frequently than you know, so our eyes are sadly not our sharpest tool. My grandfather would joke that we probably needed to borrow a pair of eyes from a golden eagle, because then we would rarely see well. Also, there were times when deer survived their injuries long after they were actually shot, sometimes going on to make an extraordinary recovery, with miraculous outcomes, going on to lead normal lives. There was one occasion that a deer was taken down by a hunter, and after his hunt, imagine his amazement to discover that the animal had been shot in the liver 2 months prior on an earlier deer hunt. The animal should have died, but it didn't. He discovered this when butchering the animal open, where he uncovered what should have been a lethal bullet hole in the deer's liver. The liver had begun to regenerate itself quite efficiently and heal over, and was functioning very well. It could have ended up living a normal life had it not succumbed to its deadly fate. Even the interior and exterior entrance wounds had healed over completely. They were virtually invisible. There was a noted dead area of blackened tissue around the bullet hole, but the body appeared to be eliminating the dead tissue, seemingly sloughing it away, much like the skin cells on our face. It would seem that the deer was in remarkably good health. These strange anomalies can happen from time to time, and are miraculous, reflecting how phenomenal the body is in enabling itself to self-heal, for animals and humans alike. My grandfather would say that deers have an incredible survival instinct, and hunters should always wait for the animal to drop down dead before running after it immediately, because an injured deer that is being pursued can even amble up mountainous ridges and get into awkward, tight, concealed places where it would be challenging to retrieve the dead animal. The deer would seemingly vanish and would invariably end up being eaten by coyotes or wolves, never to be found or retrieved by the hunter again. One day in 1966, my grandfather got a call from an elk hunter who'd only just taken down a large cow when he had intended to hit the bull that was standing by her side. It would seem that his bullet ricocheted and had hit the cow instead of the bull with a lethal blow. The hunter had scanned the whole area, following the trail and droplets of blood, but he couldn't find anything. He had, however, smelt another smell, which he described as rather sweaty and astringent, that was lingering in the air in the aftermath of the hunt. He described this pungent smell as very unpleasant, but could not fathom what it could be, and was rather flummoxed as to its origins, for indeed a smell like that, with sulphurous undertones, he had never discerned before. He was perturbed and perplexed, because the cow had been accompanied by a young calf, and now he was certain that the little calf was orphaned, and was very worried about the welfare of the little mite. My grandfather was given the coordinates and location of the hunt, and assured the hunter that he would do his level best to locate the dead elk, and find the missing calf, of course, if that was possible. Before long, my grandfather ventured to the area where he believed the cow had been shot down only minutes before. He observed the first signs of the bloody trail. Luckily, it was the monsoon season, which runs from June to September, with seasonal wind shifts that bring streams of moisture from the Gulf of California, and so the previous 3 days this dry region had been assaulted by a barrage of heavy, persistent rainfall, and some of the ground had become soft and moist, which was advantageous for discerning tracks. He noticed everything had responded to the rain, as the vegetation was now thriving vigorously, and the prairie was covered in long, sumptuous green grass, several inches tall. My grandfather followed the bloody trail, where he deciphered 2 lone sets of deer tracks, one belonging to the cow and the other to a calf, but both tracks came to a very sudden dead end. You would be forgiven for believing that the cow and the calf had seemingly disappeared into thin air, vanishing like a ghost, never to be seen or heard from again. Yet clearly that had not happened, as sometimes a cow can actually jump to the side to take cover behind a tree trunk, which could explain the dead end. But this had not transpired on this occasion. No wonder the hunter had called him frantically and asked him to get to his hunting location fast, to try and at least rescue the little calf. He said his children were willing to raise the calf, as his own family loved rescuing orphaned animals from raccoons to deers on many occasions, and had successfully returned them to the wild. My grandfather discovered another print that appeared after the deer prints, but this was a print he did not recognise at all, and left him very bewildered. What on earth could it be? It was a humanoid footprint that was certainly not human, given its monstrous size, and the very fact that the big toe was splayed to the left, that meant that this humanoid had never ever worn shoes a day in his life, and that was clearly apparent to my grandfather. Now, you don't get people who don't wear shoes, nor do you get people with feet this large. The footprint measured 17 inches and was exceedingly big. My grandfather knew that it couldn't be a bear print because he was indeed familiar with all such tracks in the wilderness, but the likes of these he had never discerned before. My grandfather said that his dog seemed perturbed and confused when they reached the end of the bloody trail, but German shepherds are exceedingly clever, and Dolly appeared to be thinking as she seemed to be connecting the dots of the missing cow to the strange new scent that she had uncovered at the end of the trail. And she appreciated that both scents were unequivocally linked, so she embarked on the decision to follow the new, rather peculiar scent, with the belief that it would ultimately lead to the original trail. My grandfather said that Dolly had figured out the new scent would lead them to the missing cow, and she was absolutely right, of course, but they were about to uncover something that would change my grandfather's view of the natural world forthwith. What he was to uncover would give him an unwavering revelation that humans cannot comprehend the depth of the vast scale of mysteries that lurk in the wilderness areas of Northern America. Many of these remote locations are veiled and steeped in mystery, as they have never been scouted or explored before by man. He ascertained that even some species considered extinct today may still be living in our forests, and he was not dismissive of this distinct possibility. Before long, my grandfather followed Dolly and Missy's trail as they traced this mysterious new scent with a robust enthusiasm that got stronger as they rambled towards an open prairie that was dotted with many elks, many of them cows with their calves. My grandfather stopped dead in his tracks, instructing both Missy and Dolly to get down and to stay very still, of which they did, flattering out their long bodies on the ground and remaining very quiet, as they were always desirous to obey my grandfather's command. My grandfather's skilled eyes scanned the rugged terrain, and he could see something moving behind the large trees that flanked the prairie. Whatever it was, it appeared to be Herculean in size, and seemed to possess a dark, shadowy, humanoid silhouette. Trembling with excitement, my grandfather tried to steady himself as he focused in on the creature with his binoculars. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. Standing there between the tree line was this huge humanoid ape-like form that appeared to be holding the living baby calf in his large humanoid hands, with fingers as large as sausages. If that wasn't strange enough, the critter appeared to be stroking the tiny calf with his huge fingers like a puppy, as if he was trying to reassure it. It appeared that the critter's dark eyes were pinned on the grazing elks in the prairie, who had not been alerted to his presence. This alone was peculiar, because my grandfather ascertained that the acetone-like smell emanating from the critter was easily distinguishable. Perhaps it was a smell that they were well acquainted with by now. Could it be that the gentle breeze was blowing in the opposite direction? My grandfather studied the creature curiously and was bedazzled and beguiled by what he was seeing, as the critter was like a humanoid giant with ape-like characteristics and influences. It was absolutely colossal and gargantuan. My grandfather calculated the creature's height, based on the size of the branch as a measuring reference, that this creature was henceforth at the very least 10 foot tall and covered in long flowing hazelnut hair that appeared a little tangled and rather matted. He described the critter as having very muscular overlong arms and powerful defined legs, with enormous hands and feet. Its excessively broad shoulders seemed to taper down to a lean, narrow waist and a flashboard-like stomach. It was like a V-shape. The body was long and exceedingly sinewy, with superb muscle tone and enviable lean muscle mass. When my grandfather focused on the critter, his powerful lens noted that the head was shaped like a bullet and had a very long, angular face, leathery brown, tan-like skin that possessed an excessively wrinkled brow ridge, a flat nose, deep-set, very intelligent dark eyes, and a slender-looking mouth. My grandfather was shaking violently by this stage because he could not believe the strange anomaly of such a creature existing in our reality. Suddenly his attention was drawn to the dead mother cow that the hunter had killed accidentally. It was lying sprawled across on a high tree branch, where it dangled precariously with its limp head facing the ground and its fixed glazed eyes staring into space with still dark motionless eyes that seemed frozen in death. My grandfather watched the hairy humanoid as it continued to stroke the calf, and he noticed the creature had tied a vine leaf around the calf's neck, rather like a necklace. On reflection, this must have been used as some kind of a marker to identify the creature in the short term. Suddenly a mother cow and her calf moved ever closer to the hairy humanoid, grazing on the luscious green turf and oblivious to the humanoid's presence. Then something rather extraordinary happened. The big hairy critter pushed the little fawn towards the mother cow, and to my grandfather's amazement, the fawn scampered over to the cow and began suckling its teats. The cow was quite happy to offer her teats to this hungry calf, not remotely concerned about sharing her milk, and it seemed that the mother's own calf also accepted this newly adopted friend. My grandfather remembers being so impressed with the intelligence of this incredulous creature, whom had showed so much compassion, discernment and ingenuity in placing a calf with another mother for sustenance, and he had retrieved the dead body of the cow to eat, but was very concerned for the welfare of the calf. My grandfather said he obviously knew that elk often do nurse other calves, and he had observed this himself firsthand on multiple occasions when a mother elk appeared to be nursing 4 calves, some clearly that were not her own. For a long time my grandfather marvelled at what he'd seen and spoke of the event to no one, because he didn't believe anyone could conceive such a seemingly fictitious account to be remotely credible. My grandfather did go back to the area where he saw the critter a day or so later and observed that the calf was very much alive and well because of the vine necklace around its neck, which clearly distinguished him from the other calves that all looked very much alike. The vine necklace would ultimately die and break off, but it proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the orphan calf had indeed been accepted by the mother elk and was now suckling. It was frolicking happily with the other calves and seemed blissfully happy and obliviously unaware of how close it came to losing its life that day. My grandfather observed no more sightings of the critter that he had encountered, who he believed was exceedingly elusive. He marvelled at a critter like this existing in Colorado, and for many years pondered over what it was that he had seen that fateful, extraordinary and wonderful day when Mother Nature revealed to him the sheer depth of her mercy. We know, of course, now that what he saw was a Bigfoot. So there you are. That's my story. Oh, I just absolutely loved that story. Wow, wow, wow. It blew my mind, and I loved just how that Bigfoot retrieved that little calf and returned it to its mother. Until next time, goodbye and good night.